Good evening, members. Can I welcome you to Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee, 30th of January 2018. Before we start on the agenda, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if a fire alarm does sound, please remain seated to enable ESI to assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building, should that be necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but to merely ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know this is taking place. Firstly, I would like to welcome everyone back. It's the first meeting since the New Year, so I wish you all still a Happy New Year, as we're still in January. Welcome back, everybody. Nice to see Councillor Hinder back. Thank you. It's normally a good news slot at the moment, but I have to tell you now and inform the committee that Mr. Paul Alcock, that was the chair of the Maidstone Leisure Trust and also the manager of the Mel, died, I think, yesterday. So we're sad to hear that news. Yeah, we're sending our condolences, and I think we're talking to the council as well to arrange something, but thank you. The good news is it was in the last minutes of the last meeting, but I just want to really emphasise that the events that the council puts on that we facilitate in the borough actually generated just over 4.5 million into the coffers, if you like, for the borough, for visitors and our residents. So that's good. And apparently, if you look into it for the whole of events for the borough last year, it could be, if you take everything into consideration, it would probably be more like 10 million. So I think it just emphasises how good we're doing a job in Maidstone for events and etc. So thank you, everyone on this team here, for helping facilitate that. I received no apologies for absence this evening, members. Are there any substitute members? Nope. Thank you. I have no urgent items this evening for item 3. Agenda item 4, notification of visiting members. Councillor Newton, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Chairman. I am interested in item 13, which is the Biodiversity Action Plan update. I reserve my right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5, members, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No, thank you very much. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Thank you very much. Agenda item 7, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. As we have no Part 2 items on the agenda this evening, I propose that we take all items in public. Is this agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December when we were in Christmas mode, pages 1 to 4, which I will rapidly find. Propose to take these pages at a time, members. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Those agreed at a correct record. Thank you, members. Agenda item 9, presentations of petitions. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cough tonight, so I do apologise. There are no petitions this evening, members. Agenda item 10, questions and answer session, members of the public. There are no questions from members of the public. Agenda item 11, committee work programme. On page 5, the programme is to note. Are there any comments on the work programme, members? Yes. Is it? Yes. I think we're okay with that. We haven't obviously got a meeting in February because we're meeting the end of this month, but yes, it's a busy agenda. Any further comments on the work programme? Councillor Blackmore, I think you might be wishing to... I feel you...
Sorry, Chairman, I do actually. We've got here setting new key performance indicators. I thought we normally set those at the beginning of the mayoral year. Municipal year, sorry.
Yes,
in our May or June meeting, rather than at the end of this one. It just struck me it was a wee bit early.
Yes, I think we had, you raised this at the last committee meeting, if I recall, and there was an email circulated.
No, that's no different.
Very different.
That's no different.
I beg your pardon. Okay, let's pass to Anna or Angela. Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, obviously the indicators run for the whole of the municipal year, so if they weren't agreed and in place by end of March, they start in April. We have done it later before, but really we like to do it earlier so they're in place. And what I will say is I don't envisage any changes to the KPIs because the strategic plan so far has not been changed significantly, and the feeling I'm getting from each committee is actually we're quite happy with the performance indicators, so it shouldn't be a huge report or item. If that helps.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got in my diary that you've got a meeting in April, or is that... You don't seem to have got anything down for April, is that so?
Sorry, just check. I don't think we've got anything yet on April. Yeah, nothing programmed at the moment, Councillor. If things slip in March, it may go to April, but I don't wish anything to slip in March. Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Sorry, Chairman, I hadn't actually finished before, but you moved on to Councillor Butler. The future governance options, that seems to be quite long overdue. I thought that was meant to come here last November. Is it definitely going to be here in March?
I'm assured that it will definitely be with us in March. I mean, I've urged officers to make sure that happens because it has been delayed, or say delayed, it has been a long time in coming. So yes, I'm not hoping, yes, March.
I mean, it just strikes me we've been talking about it ever since I joined this committee last May, and now we'll be disbanding in about 3 months' time.
Yes, I'll say not defence, but there's a lot of work has been going on behind the scenes on this report. It's taken much longer than they expected with all the different permutations in the museum, but it is being worked on now, and as I said at the meeting, the planning committee meeting, March is the time for this particular item. Thank you, members. We'll move on to item 12 on your programme. Strategic Plan 2015-20, 2018-19 refresh. Recommendation on page 6 of your papers. And I'm asking Mrs. Angela Woodhouse, Head of Policy, Communications and Governance, will present this item to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as members will be aware, Policy and Resources have approved this plan for circulation to the committees in December. The track changes in the document are highlighted in red, so you can see what's being proposed. In the main, They are updates, so it's things like where we were last year adopting a policy, we're now delivering it. So that's the changes, and it's things like updating statistics, so not significant changes. The other thing to highlight is that Policy and Resources have agreed that the top 3 priority areas will remain the same. So it will still be a home for everyone, providing a clean and safe environment, and regenerating the town centre. The 2 areas relevant to this committee are respecting the character and heritage of our borough and ensuring there are good leisure and cultural attractions. The committee is asked to consider the We Will Commit To sections for those priority areas and make any recommendations as appropriate to Policy and Resources Committee prior to the plan going to full council.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Councillor Wilson.
It's a relatively small point, but we need to work out how we overcome it. Yes, where are we? I will get to it in a minute. Under respecting the character and heritage of our borough, you've actually put there, deliver the biodiversity action plan as an addition. But there's a slight problem in this, and that is that at the Policy and Resources meeting, the actual resolution, and I've got it here so I can read it, says that the Biodiversity Action Plan be referred to under the Clean and Safe Environment priority and included in the Strategic Plan Policies map, which sort of implies that it should be under the Clean and Safe. And the problem is that that wasn't queried when the minutes came to P&R for approval, so it's still there. Now, I actually think, personally, that where you've put it is probably the best place within the plan, but we need to have some advice on how we can change or on how we actually take the resolution that was made and agreed by the committee in the minutes and adapt it so that it gets the spirit of what that committee said but sits within the plan in what appears to be the most logical place for it. That's the first one.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. You are correct. It should appear under providing a clean and safe environment. So Policy and Resources recommended that change when they considered the document in December. However, it can appear in more than one place, would be my first thing. So it could be that because I will make sure that's in when it goes to Policy and Resources in February for full consideration. The reason why it appears there, and I think it probably appeared there when it went to Policy and Resources in December, is because underneath respecting the character and heritage of our borough, we talk about the rich biodiversity. So that's the logic for where it is. It could be that we duplicate it and put it under providing a clean and safe environment as well. For example, delivering the museum's 20-year plan that appears in more than one place. The Parks and Open Spaces 10-year plan appears in more than one place. So we have got other places, like the local plan hits a number of different priorities, so it's appropriate to have it in more than one place.
I think it wasn't originally there, because that's why I believe it was Councillor Harwood picked it up and said this is signalling lacking from the entire plan. But the simplest, if the committee agree here, I actually agree with that as the simplest way forward, that we just put it under both. So that's that. I've got one more, if I may. I believe I can't remember where it was agreed that we would have an amendment to, I don't know whether it was a clean, green and safe, or safe, clean and green, but I know somewhere it was discussed. I've been looking at the public consultations and also bearing in mind the local plan, where certainly the rural community, but I believe all communities, have been saying about the decline in their environment due to house building, this sort of thing. And what they're actually talking about is what they see around them, the trees, the fields, all of that sort of thing. So I think it's really quite important that we actually pick up on what our residents are saying, and I think by the insertion of that one word, so it becomes clean, I don't care which way round it is, but clean, green and safe actually picks up on that. And the issue for me, and we'll probably pick up on it a bit later when we look at the item on biodiversity, is that words shouldn't just be words on a page. It's supposed to be imbued in the culture of a community and a culture of a borough. And I think we've got quite a long way to go, actually, in getting across the borough as a whole that understanding of the strength of feeling we've got out there, and growing. You see it every day now, don't you, in papers and what people are doing and what communities are trying to achieve. So it's just one small word. I think if it went in there, it would show that we're taking this very seriously, and it would be in the right place, because they're all interlinked. If you get it clean, the greenery is better. If you don't look after the greenery, it's an invitation for people to dump litter. It all links together. So I am proposing, and I don't know if it will be seconded, that we do insert that word into our main policies. It's right at the front, so that you don't just have clean and safe, you have clean, green and safe, or clean, safe and green. It's just the one word. I think it should go in there. And I wonder if that's seconded by somebody, please.
Councillor Lewins, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members, yes. Before we take that, can I just what you're going to ask, is that an impinge on what we've just been talking about, or not? No, okay. We'll take a vote on the...
Sorry, Chairman, may I ask a question? I don't quite understand the relevance of putting green in, because it just doesn't tally with anything else within the clean and safe environment. Because everything else within that commitment section, whether you've got the safety plan, the low emission strategy, the waste and recycling strategy, links back. I just think green stands out on its own. And bearing in mind we've already referred to the Biodiversity Action Plan, I don't really understand what it actually adds.
I think that actually proves my point, that people are not making the link between the people think of the environment, and at the moment some people tend to think of it just as the rubbish aspect of it, and as a safe environment. You actually need to consider what your actual landscape is like. But most importantly, it's what the residents are telling us. And that's why I think it's important that we actually put it in. If you can think of a better way of describing it, I'm open to the suggestion, Councillor Blackmore. But I think it is really important that we have it there. And it does link. If you are delivering a waste and recycling strategy, it's maybe not directly recycling, but certainly waste. You find if you don't look after your green areas, they attract more rubbish and detritus. If you keep them clean and green and attractive, that tends to go down. And I'm sure Mrs. Shepherd will be able to confirm that, because if you would wish to come in. I'm not asking you to support either or, but what I'm saying is I think there is some evidence to show that there is a real relationship between how you maintain areas for their pleasant aspect and the amount of litter you get on them.
Do you feel that appropriate? Thank you.
Without wading too far into the debate from a personal perspective, I mean, certainly it depends on your definition of the word green. Obviously, it's been mentioned that it could be the recycling element is often considered as sort of, a part of the green movement, and that side of things. Also, get you're saying about the actual environment itself, the physical, the parks, the biodiversity aspect of it. For me, it all sits under my remit, so it works either way, whether it's included or not. We work together and collectively support both sides of that, but I'll let you agree exactly what goes in.
Members, I don't think we need to get too bogged down in this at the moment. I think we'll take the vote as we said we would on the green issue, and we'll see how that goes. To be honest, so if we're happy, we'll go for the vote on that. Whether you want to recommend to P&R that we add green to that strategy. Yeah.
I apologise, Chairman. Last year, when we looked at the strategic plan, it was on the basis of a refresh, and we ended up in an absolute pickle, having a complete rewrite. We seemed to have version after version. It came up in all sorts of meetings. We had great big screens with bits being underlined and all being retyped at the same time. And P&R became this very confused meeting. For anyone who was there, we were scratching our heads going, this actually makes our brains hurt. So if we're looking at a refresh, I respect that. My concern is if we start tinkering around with these major titles, which had a change last year, we're then getting into the no longer a refresh, we're looking at a rewrite. And I'm sorry, I feel that is just changing it for the sake of changing it. So, sadly, I really can't support it. I'd love to, truly I would, but I just think it's making a change rather than actually bringing something. What should be important is what we as a council are doing, the action that we take, not the words that we add in. That's what residents judge us on, not the words on a page, but what we do as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. I can understand where you're coming from. I've been talking to officers about this. We didn't want another big session of name changes. But anyway, we've got a motion on the table, which we need to vote on. So can I have all those in favour who wish to add the word green? Any abstentions? No. Sorry, Councillor Butler, did you abstain then? Yeah, again. I said full, so it was 5-4 in favour of adding green. I think Councillor Fort, you were next.
I just had a question on the employment part. Where do we get the data from? And my concern is that we're building more houses, but the number of people employed in Maidstone has dropped quite considerably.
Yes, I think we all picked up on that. Dawn will take that question.
The figures for employment vary wildly quarter to quarter, and they're quite delayed as well. So I fully expect to see that figure come back up. It is just a point in time when we look at these figures. The economic development strategy that the Council's adopted puts in place measures to intervene to create as many jobs as possible to go along with the housing growth. So we've got a target for creating 14,000 new jobs, 3,000 of which hopefully will be delivered through Kent Medical Campus. And we're going to be doing a member briefing on that in the next couple of months. I'm not concerned. Our unemployment rate is low, very low. Our business startup rate is high. And our business survival rate is high. So our economy is very strong at the moment, and that figure, yes, it has dropped, but it's a cycle, and that figure will come back up. So you also asked where we get the figures from. The figures come from NOMIS, which is the government database. They collect all. The figures come from the NOMIS government database. It's where everybody gets the figures from, so there's a comparator across all councils.
Thank you for that. Councillor Blackmore, you were next. Did you want to raise any?
Thank you, Chairman. On page 18, there is a box, and it doesn't have anything in it. So I wondered if there was something important that was missing, or it's just a typo and it's in there by mistake. Because if it's important, then maybe we need to know about it.
I think that's one we've deleted, and off the top of my head, I think it's the commercialisation strategy, because that's missing, because that's been replaced with the Housing Development and Regeneration Strategy. What I will say is I struggled with this because it's artwork, and then we converted it back to words, and then as I changed it, everything went askew. So I do make an apology for the way that looks. When it comes to P&R, it'll be designed properly, and you'll be able to see what's in each box. So apologies for that. And Dawn has rightly told we need to add in the museum's plan, so I'll be putting that in just as a thank you. Sorry, Dawn.
Councillor Ford.
I don't want to be pedantic, but there are some formatting issues throughout, and there's no full stops. There's areas where there's no full stops, etc.
If I can take that, you don't have to have full stops on bullet points, would be the first thing. So that's a deliberate choice on under the we will commit to. Yeah. The other thing I will say is it's draft. So when it goes to policy and resources, it will have been designed and in its final stage. But obviously, if you've got amendments, shout, and I'll pick them up by email if that's okay, rather than going through it line by line in committee.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Just briefly, we're having a bit of a giggle over here, because if you look at my introduction, it actually says Fran Wilson again, Fran Wilson, Leader of the Council. I think the words just slipped, Mrs Woodhouse, but we have had a giggle.
Without the danger of refreshing and going line by line, can we just ask the office to make sure you'll be sweeping up, and thank you very much. Any further questions, members? There's no more questions or comments, members. We agree to note parts 1 and 2 on the report.
Mr Chairman, we can't have 2 to recommend. We need to make the recommendation. So to note the refreshed strategic plan attached at Appendix A with the agreed amendments.
With the agreed amendments, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, members, can we vote on the item 1 2 with the amendment, which says? Oh, we've voted the amendment. Sorry, can we vote on? Do you want to vote and put 2 together? Yes? No, I think so. All those in favour of the recommendations? With the amendment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Thank you, members. We move on to agenda item 13, the Biodiversity Action Plan update. Recommendation on page 46 of your papers. And I'll ask Mrs Jennifer Shepherd, Head of Environment and Public Realm, to present this item to the committee. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, the Biodiversity Action Plan update report that's presented here is regards to a piece of work that was carried out between 2007 and then finally adopted in 2011, which was a complete local biodiversity action plan for Maidstone. At the time, it was a statutory document underpinned by sort of national requirements and a national strategy. What this is looking at is actually that action plan was originally outlined for 2010 to 2014. The landscape has somewhat changed in that time, particularly the fact that local biodiversity action plans, or LBAPs as they're known, are no longer a statutory requirement. The actions are now incorporated into the local plan in most areas. Obviously, we have our Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy Action Plan, and in many places, the local biodiversity action plan has actually sort of ceased to exist in its own right and become sort of an appendix or part of the plan. We've carried out a relatively small piece of work just to look at what has actually changed since 2007 when this sort of requirement originally came in, and to look at the fact that, as I said, nothing has significantly updated in our plan since 2014, and is now it seemed to be an appropriate time to actually give it a complete refresh and look at updating it. Biodiversity is considered a key indicator of the environment, and I think it is one that is, particularly key in Maidstone. It is within the recently adopted Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy Action Plan. The refresh is incorporated in there as one of the actions. Therefore, it is proposed that we do retain this as a document. Well, as I said, there is no statutory requirement. I think it is key to show our intention going forward that biodiversity is important to us. It is incorporated into our 10-year Parks and Open Spaces plan within our own sort of land and what we can do ourselves, but also across wider communities, and to engage with the local communities, to get people to think about biodiversity from their own gardens to the wider countryside. Therefore, we are recommending a piece of work is carried out to update that plan to make sure it is not just a document that sits on the sort of the shelf, but actually is a valuable document that contributes to our local plan, contributes to our Parks and Open Spaces strategy. We have, as you've probably heard in sort of reports prior to tonight, have an underspend within the Parks and Open Spaces budget, which has predominantly come from the fact that we've combined our grounds maintenance and Parks and Open Spaces budget together, and therefore we've cut out some of the sort of wasted sort of expenditure within that. So we have the support of the Head of Finance and Business Transformation to actually use 25,000 of that underspend to carry out this piece of work, and therefore create a new document that is usable and will ensure that we continue to be focused on biodiversity going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Councillor Noonan, did you wish to speak on this item?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's something we should be going forward with. However, not all biodiversity is involved with parks and open spaces. I've lost 3 pairs of barn owls from my own ward that have moved away. Kestrels don't come anymore. We need to look further afield than just parks and open spaces, because if we don't, we're going to lose some serious, serious natural biodiversity. Birds, you build on fields. You destroy the habitat for skylarks, woodlarks and things like that. And I don't think there's been enough effort put into looking at the species that are around that are being lost. They won't come back because, you've got houses and things all built on, where they used to be. We've got ancient woodland in Ottham, almost ruined because of all of the intensity of houses there. We need really to concentrate on species that we've got here. And to be quite frank, I'm going to be talking tomorrow, Thursday night, about the bat population in and around Ottham, which, if you read what KCC are saying about, you don't have to worry about those trees because bats won't go in. They don't all hide in trees. In my job as restoration, if you come across a bat population in a roof and you disturb them, the penalties are so severe you won't believe. Yet you can put floodlights up in a sports field and destroy that environment for that particular species of bats. I mean, this needs to be looked at very, very deeply. And, you know, I just hope members are going to sort of think about that in their own environments, because, believe me, Kent is being destroyed because of, in the intense areas of Maidstone and various other councils around. Nightingales, for instance, don't come anymore. Particularly in Medway, there may have been a stop on the breeding environment for nightingales. Whether that happens or whether the planners take over, God knows. But anyway, just a comment. Thanks. And that's based on my own experience of my own ward of Downswood and Otton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. That's most interesting, and obviously I think we'll be taking that on board as we go forward. Thank you very much. Do we have further questions, please, for Jennifer on this subject? Councillor Blackmore.
Just a couple of questions. I thought we were meant to be in, I don't know, slightly tricky time. There's not very much money around. We're looking for savings. £25,000 to deliver a project that we don't necessarily need. I'm trying to work out how we justify that in the current environment. That's the first part. The second part is, on page 49, 1.14, we've got here, identify new projects funded through S106 money. What sort of projects are you thinking of, and what projects have been undertaken in the past? Because I thought S106 money was for certain aspects within an area where they've had the housing, whether that's a new sports hall or revamping a community hall that's already there, more places in medical centres, etc. Not quite sure what sort of projects you're talking about.
Section 1, obviously we can, plant, whether it's wildflower meadows that sort of encourage species of butterfly back or that type of thing. The Section 106 is for a number of, whether it's, yes, you mentioned sports or play, but actually it could be the natural, or it could be, we have amenity grass, and coming back to also linking it with that element of the cost of this. If we can find out ways that actually increase biodiversity and reduce our maintenance requirements, it therefore has the benefit of reducing our costs of maintaining those. So there is that careful balance of actually trying to preserve the biodiversity of an area, encourage it, reducing our requirements to maintain that patch of land, and equally, within those Section 106, there are all sorts of things we can bring in to encourage biodiversity, whether it's butterflies, bird species, all sorts of things. So it is in there, it is happening. You'll see also there is a mention of other projects that some other stakeholders have carried out that isn't on our land exactly, so it does expand wider than parks and open spaces. And again, whether it's, sort of old chalk, new down, so again, looking at wildflowers and those elements to really sort of keep that, so we're not going high-end horticulture necessarily all the time. We're allowing sort of the land to reclaim back to, what would have naturally been there, and again, bringing back other species.
Sorry, Chairman. As I mentioned to start with, we're meant to be in a time of so-called austerity or cost saving. £25,000 seems quite a lot of money on something that we don't actually need to have when we've got huge pressures on budgets, for example, temporary accommodation or homelessness. I find this slightly frivolous. I apologise for that, but I really do find it slightly frivolous when we have got so many pushes on other budgets which are statutory duties that we have no choice over, services that we have to deliver. And when I see something which we don't have to do, and you've managed to put a figure on it, I just don't really see the benefit. The other thing I'm struggling with is how many other councils have this type of plan in front of them and actively stick to it. I mean, surely a lot of this should fall within the planning conditions when individual applications go in front of the planning committee, or indeed if something is decided under delegated powers by the planners, isn't it up to them to put in certain conditions to encourage the development and the management of those green spaces close by the developments? I'm sorry, this to me is just a frivolous project, and I think the money could be better spent elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Well, first of all, let's take the planning aspect of it. The planning committee and indeed the planners, or I should probably put it the other way round, the planners and the planning committee can only put in conditions if they've actually got something to hang it on. And at the moment, they don't have anything to hang it on. So that's one aspect of it. The other is that this document, I think people forgot we had it, frankly. And I'll give you an example, and I have got a plea to you, actually. When you come, if this goes through, when you come to do it, I would earnestly suggest that we do not have a biodiversity action plan that has 3 sub-documents under it that nobody knows about, because recently I had occasion to query a tree that was being put in, and the fact that it had nothing whatsoever to do with indigenous species or indeed any connection to the area. And I just knew that somewhere we had a document that said what should be put in. And so I tracked it down with the help of a planning officer. It hung on the back of the Biodiversity Action Plan. It was to do with the urban landscape. And in there, it actually specified what was and what was not acceptable. And so I think this has real value. If you are seriously concerned about what is happening to our landscapes, both urban and rural, you need really robust documents to underpin it. You really do. And our green and blue document does not cut the mustard. We actually pointed this out when it was going through, that we'd got rid of some of our best policies, and we were hanging everything, hopefully, on newer ones that were less robust. I absolutely agree with Councillor Newton that it is a disaster what is happening in this country. If you read what is happening to biodiversity in our country generally, it is appalling. And if you then drill down to what is happening in Kent, it's amongst, I think it is, if not the worst, it's in the worst 3 in the country for its loss of biodiversity. I do not regard this as frivolous at all. I regard it as a tool that might actually help us to actually turn the tide. If you, in here it mentions somewhere about ancient woodland. We could, we're always cracking on about ancient woodland. You want to go back and look and see how much of our ancient woodland in this wonderful borough of ours has been compromised in the last 5 years. There is masses of it. And so if the green and blue document was as robust as I would have liked it to have been, we might not have needed this, but actually, I think we need this. We need this for the people. I'm sick to death, actually, Councillor Blackmore, of hearing certain councillors bang on and on and on about the loss of the environment, and then when you try to say, let's try and get something robust in place that might actually allow us to fight these battles, the answer is we don't want to do it. We need it. We absolutely need it. And I don't want to spend a penny piece that we don't have to, frankly, because I do know the situation we're in. But I care deeply about this borough of ours, and I care deeply about the natural environment, and I think it's a tragedy if our children will not see butterflies and will not see birds and are divorced from the natural environment around them, because then they won't have any care for it either, and we'll get even more of the problems we face with antisocial behaviour. The whole thing is interlinked, and I couldn't disagree with you more, but actually between us that's often quite not unusual. We do agree sometimes, but I don't see this as frivolous. I'm sorry, I just don't.
I'm very encouraged to see a robust debate on this subject, members. Councillor Blackamoor, you want to come back?
I do. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the lecture. Always appreciated. Try and give the same lecture to someone who's homeless and has nowhere to stay, and I think you might get a different reaction. I think they would be less interested in your heritage woodland, etc. All they're seeking is a roof over their heads. But I take the ideal point. I take your ideal situation, but sadly, life is not ideal.
I'm sorry, I have to come back on that because actually that's quite despicable, because Councillor Blackmore knows as well as anybody else that I fought just as hard over the homelessness situation as anybody else. Indeed, I fought some people who have, in our own council, who have tried to diminish that as well. That is a key priority for this council. It does not change, and more money is going into it all the time.
Members, I think we need to focus on the thing in hand here. We're talking about biodiversity, and this is the decision we have to make this evening. I agree with the comments being made on other issues, but it's not for this committee. We're not on that subject this evening. We are talking about this issue of biodiversity and whether we're going to spend this money, which is available. So, Councillor Hinder, I think you wish to speak.
Yes, Chairman. I just want to say you only have to come to Walderslade to see the loss of ancient woodland, and it's still going on. Boxley Parish Council is saying all the time there's not enough robust policies to protect the ancient woodland, and I've seen developers just go in and they just cut it down, and we have nothing to back us up. So, whilst I understand Councillor Blackmore's concern, I do think this is also of a great concern to keep the ancient woodlands. Up there in Walderslade, it's actually between two motorways with all the pollution that goes on up there. We need to keep the trees. It's been so much destruction up there already over the years. And maybe if this policy, sort of policy had been in place then, we wouldn't have lost so much up there. So I do actually support this. Thank you.
Councillor Ells.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to follow that. I just want one thing, following on from Councillor Newton. I believe that the 25,000 is due to come from the Parks and Open Spaces budget, but it is being spent more broadly. Just to reiterate, it's not just on Parks and Open Spaces, it is broadly. I do support this. I understand Councillor Blackmore's point about the money, but once nature's gone, it's gone. And I think in many places we've already lost the battle, and we need to do something to turn this around. Although people will say they'll put empty in the bins first, etc., they're also the first people to shout when the trees go, when there's no parks, when they're not seeing the birds, when the starlings aren't arriving in their gardens. So it's difficult to judge on that, but I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lewins.
Thank you. I really support this. It's linked to the Parks 10-year plan. Maidstone needs to hold on to as much green space and biodiversity. I think Councillor Blackmore's comments are out of perspective with this, because Maidstone and everyone else needs this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ford.
The plan itself, will they, whoever's doing it, they'll do a borough-wide survey, and will they pick out certain sites that need to be protected, etc.?
The intention is, as I said, it was to review and refresh the basis what we have. We don't want to move away from all of the data. As it says in the report, it sort of was an 18-month process when this was originally carried out. And that's within the 2007 to 2011 sort of time period that the information was captured and mapped. We want to update the maps. We want to make sure that our database of species, habitats is as accurate as it can be, so we can then hang those policies, as has already been said, on that. So it's based on some strong foundations. At the moment, we're not where we need to be. What was gathered up until 2011 has somewhat stood still. We need to look at the environment we're in now, update that so it will stand the test of time.
Any other questions, comments, members? Councillor Butler.
This is really more of an aside than anything else. I see that in the Appendix A it says Maidstone Climate Change Action Plan and Green Space Strategy. I don't recall having seen that. Could someone send me a copy of that, please?
I will certainly speak to John Littlemore, who I think it falls under his remit, so we'll make sure that's updated. I said that was collated from the work we've done.
Councillor Ford.
And is the 25,000 set in stone, or could that be reduced or?
That was based on a piece of work that said this is what we would suggest is carried out to complete the work. Yes, if there's more that can be done within our own team, that will then reduce the physical cost, so to speak. It'll be incorporated within Parks and Open Spaces team's own work. We will do as much as possible. Our own IT teams for doing GIS mapping and all of that. So where we can shave that cost down, we really will. We won't spend anything we don't have to. I hope you can see, we have a significant underspend within Parks and Open Spaces this year because we're doing that. We're not spending what we don't have to spend by, duplicating work that was happening between grounds maintenance and Parks and Open Spaces. And we're also, looking at other ways we can bring money in to sort of supplement this.
Could I just ask you what your underspend was?
At the second quarter, it's 143,000.
Any further questions, comments, members? I'm going to say from the chair that I think we're talking about other issues here, but I think unless we get our health and environment sorted going forward for generations and preserving our countryside and building in issues where developers are doing things, I think we're not going to be thanked. And I think we have an opportunity here to actually bring in this plan and work forward positively for the borough, is my view. I think we'll go to the vote on the recommendation on the paper. Sorry, Councillor Butler.
Just before we get to that, you've got a green and blue plan and you've got a biodiversity plan. Is it planned to bring everything together? Is that?
Yes, that is the intention.
Yeah, I think we're working. I say master plan is not the word, but I think we're trying to bring forward the new with the old and bring a new plan forward so we can actually make accurate and really good progress on this. Jennifer, before we go to the vote, do you want to say anything further on this before we? No. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, we'll go to the. I'll read it out to you that the committee agrees to carry out a refresh of Maidstone's Biodiversity Action Plan, funding from the underspend from Parks and Open Spaces 2017-18 budget. All those in favour? Those against? One. Abstention? None. Thank you, members. We move on to the maths sessions again. Agenda item 14, which is fees and charges, page 55 on your papers. And I'm asking that Miss Ellie Dunnett, the Head of Finance, will present this item to the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this report details the proposed fees and charges for this committee for 2018-19 onwards. We review our fees and charges annually. That review is carried out by budget managers and it's done in line with the Council's policy on charging. The committee is asked to agree the proposed charges for next year, which are set out at Appendix 1. Largely the changes are down to rationalising the existing fees, and in some cases inflationary increases have been included to offset the impact of increased costs. Income budgets are included in this report for context, but they don't form part of the committee's decision on the budget proposals. They're just there for information. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ford.
I've just got some questions on the museum hire, because it looks as if the proposed charges are being reduced to encourage uptake. How is it advertised? And because to be quite honest, the per day for some of it is 135, the library 300. It seems quite cheap to me. And if you hire it, can you, you can have alcohol, food? I mean, because it seems to me that it could be quite a profitable venue.
I'll ask Dawn to respond to that. Thank you.
The reason that, well, there's several reasons that we've reduced the charges. We are finding it very, very difficult to compete with the free venues in the town centre. Virtually all of the chain coffee shops, such as Starbucks and Costa, offer free meeting rooms if you just buy their coffee. And so our demand, we have seen our demand really drop because of that. And so we've done a little bit more research about room hire rates. We do have a new leaflet. We are promoting them. It's quite difficult to sell the rooms in the museum. We don't have parking. So that's a big drawback. And in answer to the second part of the question, yes, we fully service the rooms with catering, whatever is required. It's all provided through the cafe and the licence that we have for the cafe.
Councillor Hinder.
Okay. Actually, it's quite interesting what Dawn said. Would there be any way that you could have parking? Because I often walk up there. Is there any way we could have some parking actually in the museum or near the museum? Because you've got land around it, haven't you? Could that be utilised? Not taking away the park. I don't mean the park, but there's some hard standing around it. I just wondered if that would be possible without not going into the park. Sorry.
We have a small amount of parking at the back, which is for staff, but it doesn't accommodate all the staff. It's a first-come, first-served basis. And we do have a number of marked bays down the side of the museum, 3 or 4, and 2 of those are disabled. So we're very limited. There isn't any other space. It's access to the park there, and any development of parking would encroach into Brenchley Gardens.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Wilson.
This really arises, Mr. Chairman, from the meeting we go to as the board of the museum, where you will recall that it was said about everybody's so cash-strapped now that teachers, for example, are not availing themselves of the services of the museum staff. But so while they might still be coming to a visit, they're not using our staff. And I'd just like to understand how or if that's reflected here at all in the charges we're now making, because we don't actually say, we say school visits first hour, but it doesn't separate out, well, is there a visit for a school if the teachers, does the school just turn up and their own teacher takes them round, and in that case they wouldn't be charged? That's really what I'm going to get at. So this is where they do use all our facilities. So are we assuming a reduction this coming year in the profit from that, in view of what that concern is from that teachers are not actually using our facilities?
The easy answer to that question is yes. We haven't made the income target for last year, due to a number of reasons. The take-up of school visits was affected by some of the closure of some of the galleries, and the Ancients Gallery, now that's opened, we are actually fully booked now with school visits through into March, so we'll see that pick up. We are struggling to meet that income target because schools are feeling their pressures on their own budget. So, as you quite rightly say, when schools were coming in previously, they would come in with the teacher and they would book our sessions with our learning officers. We're seeing more and more now schools will come in as a visit, free visit, and the teachers will take the pupils around the museum and do their own workshop with them. But we have just been extremely lucky to find out that we're getting Extended Arts Council funding, which will enable us to continue with the learning programme for another 2 years, which is absolutely fabulous. And we can't reduce these costs anymore because that's actually what it costs us to staff on top of the subsidy that we get. But we do have a very stretched income target for education, which is difficult to achieve.
You've actually answered my question. Even though we would wish to encourage them to use the services, we can't reduce any more because it would take us below the cost to us, whether they do. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I think members broad and large, it sets out here that they've gone into great detail where things can be raised or lowered depending on the market forces that are there, especially the museum. And as we say, everyone is cash-strapped these days, and obviously we need to be realistic with our targets. More questions on... There's no more questions, members. I'm going to go to, we can note the report as agreed. The report makes the following recommendation that the proposed discretionary fees and charges set out in Appendix 1 to this report are agreed. Are we agreed, members? Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Sorry, members, another maths lesson coming up. Agenda item 15, medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals for 2018-19. Recommendations on page 73 of your papers. Again, Miss Ellie Dunnett, Head of Finance, will present this item to the committee. Thank you again, Ellie.
Thank you. This report sets out the revenue and capital budgets for this committee for the 5-year period from 2018-19. Which form part of our medium-term financial strategy. The strategic revenue projections included at Appendix A to the report, and that sets out the current position for the Council, which shows that we're facing an anticipated budget gap of 4.6 million over the next 5 years. This incorporates a number of areas where we've identified spending pressures, and for this committee it includes a reduction in the income target for the market at Lockmeadow, which reflects the trend that we've been observing in recent years. Budget managers have developed savings proposals in response to the budget gap, and these are included at Appendix C to the report. For this committee, contributions for the forthcoming financial year are anticipated to come from the Moat Park Adventure Zone, which is due to open next year. One of the assumptions that we've made in developing the strategy is that the savings proposals which were agreed as part of last year's medium-term financial strategy will be delivered, and we've included details of those in Appendix B. In terms of capital, the proposed programmes included at Appendix E to the report, and the most significant areas of spending there relate to a variety of ongoing projects within the Council's parks. The committee is asked to review and agree the proposals for submission to Policy and Resources Committee on the 14th of February. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Members' questions? ominously quiet. Are we all... Councillor
I
Wilson.
have to raise it because I know we are being watched. There will be Christmas lights this Christmas, I am given to understand. And if that is the case, then we need to have it clearly minuted.
Yes, you can see from the papers that it's ongoing, but this year the Christmas lights will be sparkling in Maidstone, definitely this Christmas 2018, and we're looking forward to the future to see where we go with this. But at the moment, we do have Christmas lights this year, and we'll put that in the minutes. Councillor Bettmore.
Thank you. I note on page 74, 1.5, there is mention of the 2% increase for the council tax. Obviously, it's always rated on Band D and thereafter for the other groups. I vaguely remember something in national news about possibly up to 3%. I'd just be interested in a little bit more background about that and whether that will be included within the budget figures that we will see at full council in a few weeks' time.
Thank you. Yes, so this report follows a report which went to Policy and Resources in December. At that time, the announcement over the option to increase council tax by an additional 1% hadn't been made. It will be incorporated in the proposals that are coming back to Policy and Resources Committee in February. But in the appendix you've got to this report, that is the same appendix that went to Policy and Resources, and it was agreed would then be circulated to the service committees. So yes, that is something that will change.
Okay, members, any other questions on this issue? No? I think we'll take them in, if there's no more comments, 1 and 2 separately, just so for clarity. It is recommended that the committee agrees the revenue budget proposal for services within the remit of this committee, as set out in Appendix C, for submission to Policy and Resources Committee. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. And item 2, agrees the capital budget proposal for services within the remit of this committee, as set out in Appendix E, for submission to Policy and Resources Committee. Is that agreed, members? Thank you very much. Just before we close, I'd just like to remind members that the invitation still stands for the Friends of Maidstone Museum for the Ancient Lives Gallery tomorrow. Just to remind you, that's on at 5:30. And our next meeting is on March the 6th. So, having said that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.